What's going on, fam? Back, another episode. See, here's the thing. Failure. How can we learn from it? How can we embrace it? And more importantly, it's not always a bad thing. So we're gonna take a dive into that just to see, because I think we all can agree we've got a fear of failure. At some point in your life, it happens, and most of the time it happens when you're a kid. I saw a study recently. I said 31% of adults have a fear of failure. So that being said, I think for me, I can think of various points in my life where I had that fear of failure, as a kid, as an adolescent, now as an adult. So to put everything in context, B, let me start with you.
Mhm.
What do you think, in your opinion, is one of the reasons that we have this fear of failure?
I mean, it's a million of them, I think, right? But to take a couple, I mean, I think back to, like you were saying, childhood, there's a fear of failure, right? I don't want to fail my math quiz and mom's going to be upset and take my toys away. I think we start out the gate with that, right? Or don't spill something on the floor. Failure. I cleaned up the house. I got to mess up, So I think out the gate, we're kind of scared of that, Bad grade, I get a whooping. You're afraid of that whooping.
Yeah.
So
Fear that butt.
yeah. So there's the failure there. And then you move on, teenage years. Okay, I might not get a butt whooping no more, but if same scenario, fail the quiz, I can't pass to the next grade. Then you come to adulthood, if I fail at work, I'm fired. I don't have a job. I'm homeless. Of course, that accelerates, but
Damn. Went from
I'm
0
just
to 60.
I could go on for days, but there's a big fear.
And you asked him what anticipates this fear. He's like, I want to have a roof over my head.
So yeah, exactly, Carl. That's a fear of failure. You don't want to lose the roof over your head. So again, like I said, it's a million things, but I think that a childhood, teenage years, prepubescent, and adulthood, those are just some of the starts. And I could go on for days, but I'll just give you that one.
So is there one in particular that you think stands out, when you talk about a fear of failure? And I say that because right now, being in the midst of your career, is that one that kind of takes priority where you want to make sure that you're not failing at your job?
Yeah, I think that's a big one because, I mean, career-wise, that's what, I don't know, if I do the math, that's what, 60 hours of my week. So if you fail there, you're out of that. You're then,
Jeez.
I know,
Wow.
I work a lot,
My man
unfortunately. That's the issue I have. But to get back to the question, failure there, you're not only looking at, again, the financial failure because, I'm out of a job, I'm out of income, then you're looking at a failure of purpose because I look at work as a purpose. So there's a big fear of those two things there. And then just the rabbit hole of stuff you get from being unemployed, the boredom, what seeps things you get into. So I think that's the current one of many others, but yeah, that's a big one in the room right now.
Carl, what do you think is a big fear of failure? What drives it?
I think what Brandon said are the consequences. Starting, for like you said, from an early age, it's always, I want to pass, classes. I want to be able to, behave myself so I don't get people calling my house. It's an inside joke. But anyway,
Time out.
right. And then it goes on to, and even when you're, with your peer group, got to get, particularly boys, and I don't know about girls, but even girls too, when you're doing activities on the block, if, football, baseball, basketball, girls might be, they might do sports as well, or they might do, stuff like double dutch and whatever. Yeah. And it's like, if you can't get it, if you can't, participate in these activities, then you might get teased, you might get,
can't run fast enough.
Right. You can't run fast enough. You last pick, guys are always saying, I don't want to be the last pick.
Yep.
So it's like, you want to be able to accelerate your learning curve, so to speak.
And I'm glad you brought that up, Carl, because one of the things that I saw in the study as well is, to your point, men have a higher percentage of fear failure as
absolutely
to women. And I think partially because of, the way we are culturally conditioned as we come up. Let
Absolutely.
me ask you guys, though, do you think that perhaps a fear of failure could come from expectations?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
What you just said, I mean, men are expected to succeed. You're expected to achieve.
Yes.
That's what culturally, you're going to be the leader. You're going to be the head of your household. You're going to be the provider, whether it be for a family, most likely, it's always built around a family, but even if it's for yourself, you got to be a man. You got to, that's a whole nother show when you define what is a man. But
Oh, yeah.
but that's the expectation that you have. So you got to really get into, okay, what do I need to do to make this happen?
Yeah.
And if I don't make it happen, not only will I let people down and I will be looked at as less than, but I might be homeless.
So let's talk about that then. You talk about letting people down. So when we talk about expectations, I'll defer to you on this. Are these expectations that you put on yourself, or are they expectations from those around you, family, and Carl, to your point, friends? Because I'll say that I think, and I tell people this all the time, I'm probably my worst critic.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and nobody can be harder on me than I can be on myself.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, again, do you think that self-pressure is something that drives, a fear of failure?
I think it's both, like you're saying, the external and the internal. Because, yeah, like you said, we're all our hardest critics, right? We're the man in the mirror every day. But there's also on the outside, for men, I can at least speak for it, there's this little nuance that no one's coming to save you, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a big, huge fear that kind of the outside is pushed on us. Like Carl was saying, you're a man. You need to be able to pull up your bootstraps, provide, do this, that, the other, regardless, right? And on the inside, you're looking at it to respond like, this is true. I got to do this. If I don't do it, who's going to save me? Where's my fallback? My fallback is the guy in the mirror.
So did that come, you say, talking about the outside, internally, oh no, let me say this, your immediate family, because a lot of times parents will unknowingly put these unrealistic expectations onto their kids. So can you say if that played a role in your house? Because I know it's different for everybody.
Yeah. I think it varies. Like, I think learning now, because I can reflect a lot on my upbringing, I was brought up to be pretty independent. So I think I defaulted myself into that no one's going to save you mentality. And it's a gift and a curse, because I'm like, man, if something goes wrong, uh-oh.
But see, you've seen that, though, from the outside, though, because I know for me, my mother, who, she was in the house, dad wasn't, but mom was there. We learned certain things almost through osmosis. So my mother never said to me, these are the expectations. But I think watching how hard she was working to maintain a household, there were just certain things that I knew.
You just
Look,
saw
I got to do this. And, even, and I've told this story before, going to college, it was never said to me, Eugene, you're going to go to college. But because I was surrounded by brothers who we all had pretty much the same mindset, Carl, I expected that I was going to go
by default.
And again, I see that, pressures that are put on, especially kids coming up today, some of it is from your parents. And I think those are instances where, parents may be trying to live vicariously through their kids. Maybe mom or dad didn't succeed in this area, so you want Junior to go to med school and this, that, and the third, and he can't get out of chemistry.
But I think that for that instance, and you're right, there are a lot of parents that want to live vicariously through their children and push them in directions and have this level of success. But again, we have to look at what is success. What is your level of success? And if, you might have a kid that graduates high school and they go, start a lawn care business or a landscaping business.
Yeah.
That parent might have had aspirations of them being a doctor. So that parent can say, well, they can either, and hopefully they don't project that on the child, but they might say, I failed. Some kind of way I failed.
Yep. Yeah.
I didn't do my job because he's out there cutting grass and he's got a brilliant mind and he can be a doctor. And he could be making $150,000, $200,000 a year.
And happy as can be.
And happy as can be, you know, and his level of I'm not a failure, I'm
Yeah,
successful.
exactly.
But if that parent, and depending upon the culture, it's always going to be that way.
Oh yeah.
Mhm.
If that parent can say, you know, look at you. You should go back to school. That's that. So now you're gonna start making them like, am I a failure?
Yep.
You know?
That's one of the things that I had down here for me, my fear of failure as a parent, you know, because when your kids don't do not necessarily what you expect them to do, but maybe things that you think would be more conducive to whatever measure of success. You know, I tell the boys, you know, do whatever you want to do if it makes you happy and you can take care of yourself
Mhm.
as an adult.
Mhm.
You know, if you have a family, if whatever you're doing, you can maintain that, have at it. Having a 5-year-old daughter now, I realized that number one, everybody at some point, every parent is going to say, I failed at some point. I look at my 5 and I swear sometimes she looks at me and I say to myself, what am I doing wrong? Because I do. I really I go through in my head, is she looking at me saying, Dad, you don't know what the hell you're doing? At 5.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
you know, I've
yeah.
had the conversation with the boys, you know, they're adults and, you know, they don't know. You know, so I think that's probably pressure that we put on ourselves as parents or, you know, fear of failure as a husband. You know, there is no tried and true way to be successful as a parent, to be successful as a spouse. You know, so for me, I think we can all agree a fear of failure, it's a part of life.
Oh
But,
yeah.
you know, it's part of that life cycle. And I think that, you know, one of the things that we can do, you know, is embrace it because it's gonna be there. It's like death and taxes.
Yeah, and it takes a lot of growth to get there though. And I'm gonna say I agree
Yeah.
with you, but um, there's a quote that's attributed to Nelson Mandela where he says, "I never lose. I either win or I learn."
Learn from it. Yep.
Mhm.
And a lot of people are saying that now, and you know, it's coming. And had I heard that when I was in my teens, that may have been a little bit more impactful, because again, when you're younger, it's black or white. You either win or you lose.
Mhm.
And if you lose, that can be very impactful on you for years to come.
Mhm.
But as a parent or as a spouse, even when you're doing the best that you can, sometimes you feel like, okay, like you said, what am I doing wrong? Am I doing something
Yeah.
right? Am I doing something wrong?
Mhm.
And again, with being a parent, all of my children are over 25. And now they talk to me and they'll tell me things that I did wrong
Mhm.
or that I missteps that I made. Now, in the moment, and you know, most of them I recall, like, oh yeah, I remember that. And I'm really standing 10 toes on it. Like, yeah, I made the right decision when I did it. Now,
Little wiggle room now.
yeah, you know, but I'm able to hear their point. I'm able to
Yeah.
see their point of view. And had I done something different, probably would have been some different outcomes and all that stuff. But they're doing fine. So
And you
that's
know, the interesting part about that,
Good
though, I'm
part.
sorry, Brent, is
yeah.
that
man.
that's what we do. Well, that's what we've done in terms of our parenting. You know,
Mhm.
and I don't think I've ever had a conversation with my mother or my father, especially my mother, because wasn't doing that. But as we become parents, we tend to reflect on those things that worked as our parents were parenting us. And we say,
Mhm.
okay, you know what? I'm going to take that when I become a parent. And to your point, the girls tell you stuff that they felt you misstepped. Once they become parents, they're not going to do those things, you know, but they're going to make their own mistakes.
They might. No, because sometimes you have to
Maybe.
know, you know your child. So some decisions you'll say, you know, this, well, can I do something? No. And then they may be mad, they may be upset. Years later, they're going to bring it up. And then,
Or they go do it. Yeah.
right. And then you're like, but think about it. And I don't care. I'll use this as an example. And she's going to get mad at me, but it is. So my middle daughter comes to me in middle school and said she wanted to run cross country. And I said, you don't want to run cross country. Go somewhere. And nothing was said. Probably years later, you know, she was in high school at the time. You know, I was going to run cross country, but daddy didn't want me to run cross country. Because that's not you. She's not that she's not athletic, but she doesn't pursue athletic endeavors. I'll say that.
Mm.
So years later, she still brings it up, halfway jokingly. But I'm saying like, okay, what's stopping you from running right now? You can go outside and run all you want to. Well, I want to run now. Well, what made you think you wanted to run then?
Never
And
too late.
Not even sprints, cross
See?
country.
It's never too late to
It's like,
start.
I've never seen you run anytime.
So imagine if Sha'Carri Richardson's people would have told her, "You don't want to be no runner."
If she was out there running, now that's the thing.
She
Sha'Carri
might
was
have
out there
started
running back and
in the
forth up and
backyard.
down the
Yeah.
driveway
Yeah.
and it said, I want to join the track team. Now, if y'all see that, then it's like, oh, you don't need to be on the track team. Well, that's different. But when you're sitting around watching TV all day, and not that she was, because I know
She was researching.
you know, right. I mean, all my children are wonderful, wonderful child.
So
But-
here we go.
But that's not your endeavor.
Hmm.
And I mean, you know, and my thing is, okay, that was 7th grade, 8th grade. You went to high school. What stopped you?
See, there you go. Lord. B, let me ask you real quick, because I had this on my mind.
Mhm.
What about people that play it safe? Because everybody has a fear of failure. Have you come across people, and I'm not going to ask if you've ever done that, but you know where I'm going when I say
Yeah.
people that play it safe.
And my opinion is the Stoic quote I've heard. I can't remember. I'll probably quote it next episode properly, but comfort is the biggest killer. And as much as you fear failure, there's going to be so much on the other side of the what if versus me almost being 30 now. If I just sit being comfortable saying this is safe, I would bet a pot of money that if I was 75 years old, say, why did I play it safe? And I got a lot of situations that I look back now like, man, why did I play it safe about that? I'm pretty sure
Mhm.
you guys are like that
Oh,
same
absolutely.
way. It's like, I understand it, but I think, like we were kind of saying earlier about the example with the kids, you know, there's a fear of failure, but fast forward to adulthood, they're all right?
Mm-hmm.
It's the same situation when you play the comfort role. If you jump out your comfort zone, have you ever died? We're still here at the table, right?
Yeah. And,
So-
and I think too, part of it is, people, they're embarrassed, they feel like they won't measure up, so they don't even want to chance it. And
Mhm.
quite honestly, I say to myself, there's no way that you can go through life and just play it safe all the time.
Yeah.
I don't know anybody like that, that does it on a consistent basis. And then I have to wonder, do you think anybody would ever admit to that? Yeah, man, I play it safe all the time.
That's interesting.
You know what? I think some people
I
would.
want to see that.
I think some people would because
Consistently?
they're going to admit their fear. Okay, what was the stat you said? 60% of whatever it was that say that
How
they
many
have
had
a
a
fear
fear
of
of
failure?
31% of all adults
Okay,
surveyed.
those other people that don't are usually the most successful people.
Mhm.
If people look at and this is the thing, I want to quote I always say, go back to, everything you want is on the other side of fear.
Bam.
Mhm.
If you play it safe all the time and you have this fear of failure and fear of embarrassing yourself and fear of what people are going to say, so I'm going to stay right here, you're going to look at the dude that's failed 1,000,000 times, but now he's happy as can be with
Mhm.
millions of dollars and whatever you want, whatever you think that you would want, this person has it
Bingo.
because they said, well, like you said, what's the worst thing that could happen?
Mhm.
He failed forward, and that's the big thing too. You look at it
There you
the
go.
way life goes, you're gonna fail, but if you're at least trying, like you said, I'm doing my best. You're gonna fail
Mhm.
forward, right? You failed the class in middle school, whatever. You ended up in high school. Might have failed the class in high school. You ended up in college. So
I failed the
That-
class in college too. I still graduated.
Oh,
But
yeah.
anyway,
that's a career. So see what I'm saying? You can fail
You either took
forward,
it over or you took another class. So,
Yeah.
but you weren't afraid to.
Yeah. No, and that's why I failed, because I took the class I shouldn't have took.
But he tried.
But I
See,
tried.
that's the point I'm
I
trying
did
to get to.
try.
There was no fear of failure there.
I
You
did
didn't play
try.
it safe.
Because so for the people that do play it safe, then whatever level of success that you achieve is going to be minimal. I would have to think.
Mm-hmm.
I think when we talk about fear of failure, for me, I look at Carl, like you said, what's on the other side, and they're talking about different causes for this fear of failure. And as I was doing some research, of course, we already talked about, critical upbringing, your parents. You're going to do this. You don't do this, you're going to be nothing, so on and so forth. The definition of failure, what we consider to be failure, because we have all types of vehicles that put out different definitions, whether it's your friends, whether it's social media, whether it's society. And the one that I was surprised at was genetics. For instance, when you talk about anxiety,
Ooh, good.
and having suffered from anxiety, I can say that, it's real.
Oh, yeah.
Because if your parents, or somebody in your bloodline has issues with anxiety and you see it and you're around them,
Yeah, or
then,
other
of
mental
course,
issues. Yeah.
at some point, it comes out. Trauma,
Big one.
coming up in the 70s and 80s. Yeah. I didn't realize
The crack era.
the trauma
I'm trying to
that
tell
that we went through,
Mhm.
and I remember walking to school one day, somebody had gotten shot and killed on the street. They hadn't cleaned the blood up. So we walking past, coagulated blood on the
Boys gonna
sidewalk.
do it. Want to see a dead body?
Yeah.
So you don't think about stuff like that.
No.
And another one I found, perfectionism.
Mm.
That is a big one right there, because I never considered myself a perfectionist. I don't know if I've ever met one, but I can only imagine the type of pressure that you put on yourself, thinking, I got to get all A's. I got to get this. I got to do that. So I got to have the biggest house. I got to make the most money. And it's like, at the end of the
Dangerous.
day, so what if you don't?
Yeah.
Because back to embracing fear, we get to the point where we realize that, failure is a part of life and you can actually learn from it.
Yeah. It's the
You know,
greatest teacher.
Exactly. You think about stuff, and one of the things that I learned from my years of being in therapy is, a lot of times that fear of failure, we jump to conclusions on stuff, and it prohibits us from, trying something where you say, okay, well, no, I don't want to do that because, I might. Well, if you just let everything play out, a lot of times it doesn't end up being as bad as you thought it was going to be.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So I'm continuing, to grow with that. I think that it's important too for us to make sure that, we are embracing people that we may know that have that issue, and that comes into, things like mentorship and things of that nature. So
I also think it's important that we look at people who we deem to be successful. A lot of times we'll see somebody who's successful and we ask them, what did you do? How did you build your business? How did you, do that? We don't ask the question, what are your failures? What are your biggest failures? And how did you learn from them? How did you grow from them? Because that's what we really want to know.
Yeah. Yep.
We really want, because you can tell me all day long, well, I did this, I did this, I did this. And in some people's mind, they're gonna think like, well, if I don't do it like that, or if I don't do that and get the same results, then I fail. They're not gonna, you wanna ask them, okay, well, did you do it like that right off the bat, or did you do something? Well, the first time.
Yeah. First couple times.
First couple times. Okay, that's what I need to know.
Bingo. Yeah.
And then I can say, okay, well, I want to learn from your failures to see where you have made your successes. And we can do the same thing. We can do it in relationships. We can do it in, work, business, personal life, all of that. So
yeah, I'm really big on that learning. I wish I was like that younger, where I asked people to learn from their failures. But now I'm at the
say,
time
younger
like,
man, you 29 years old.
well, I could look. It was some stuff I wish I knew at 21, and I wouldn't have been in a situation like we talked about.
He wouldn't be sitting here with us right
Okay.
Look at those guys. Those guys in that cute little podcast. Look at that. It's wonderful. Bring the Bentley around.
but no, like seriously, because I look at it now as like I failed a lot in a lot of things, and now I'm like, okay, I'm glad I failed here. So when I approach this situation, I know what to do and what not to do. And I think a lot of people are like that, where if you would have sat down with maybe your future self and say, hey, I did this, don't do this,
bro,
or I should have did this. And imagine how many headaches, failures, heartaches, job opportunities, how that could have saved you. So I think that's a big one too. If you can,
So I think then we can say that these are instances where you learn from failure.
Yep.
Definitely. On the other side of embracing it, because it's not a bad thing.
No, not at all.
Well, it feels that way when it's happening.
Yeah.
You got to get past that pain. And I think that's what people just don't want to do. They don't want to feel that pain. But it's gonna be some pain.
But most of the time, like I said, it doesn't end up being as bad as you thought it was
It's
going to be.
temporary pain.
But you know
Yeah,
what?
it is.
Like you were saying about the therapy thing, I went to therapy too, and I had anxiety. And my biggest fear, unbeknowingly to myself, was failure. And my therapist was like, okay, you're looking at this bad situation, whatever it was. And I kind of learned working with her through that, like, okay, you go through this quote unquote storm. Did you die after the storm? You know, did you lose a limb? Did you lose your house? Did you lose your job? And then you're like, oh, it just was a rough 24 hours or a failure of such. But 2 weeks later, I'm fine and I forgot about it. And I think that's a part a lot of people kind of struggle with
Mhm.
because you're just wallowed in that failure or even the potential fail itself. But when you get in that failure, you're like, oh my God, I lost my job. And you can't move on to that part to where you say, how did I lose my job? Or I went through a breakup. I'm just so wallowed in that. Same thing, you can never move forward. But I think a lot of people just get caught trapped in that failure for X amount of time and you can't move forward and then you're just stuck.
So I'm glad you brought that up because I'm wanted to segue to this. Well, not segue, but I had a business. Probably this was back in when did Luther die? The same year Luther died.
Oh Lord, you got me.
Rest in peace to Luther Vandross. So let's say 2006, I think it was. Yeah, 2005, 2006.
Okay.
And thought I was one, I was one of these people. This is even pre-social media and pre all this stuff with seeing people, but I felt that I could do things on my own and I was needed to run my own business and I was tired of working for the man and so on and so forth.
Who is the man?
That's a whole nother show.
That's an episode. We
That is
dive into that one because I want to know too.
because the man and they are the same person.
We got both him, yep, both of them. I'm gonna make a note of
They
that.
know things. So opened the business. Business was doing okay. One of the things that I did not anticipate was, and small business owners, I always feel for them when I see this. Living in Michigan, there's always going to be construction. Road shuts down under major construction. Lost a lot of foot traffic. Went through a rough couple of months. Had to end up walking away from the business.
Mm.
To your point, B, I was, and what I realize now, and I did not go to therapy and have not gone to therapy. Not that I'm against it, I just haven't done it, but I should have gone at that time
Mhm.
because what I realize now, looking back, I went into a depression
Mm.
and was in a depression for years and operated through it. And, I got another job, but it was so much, I was stuck in that
Yeah.
failure. And what could I have done differently? And why did this happen? And I also found out that it was grief because I'm reading, I'm looking at stuff, and it's like things are clicking because it's like somebody started talking about grief and processing grief, and it's like through the loss of a loved one, the loss of a job, the loss of a business, and I was
In
like,
general.
loss. Oh man, loss.
Mm-hmm.
So those are things that I did not process at the time, and it cost me emotionally a lot because, like I said, it took me years to come out of this funk
Mm-hmm.
where I was like, okay. Now I'm on the other side. What did I learn? What can I learn from this? If I want to do this again, I learned I need to do X, Y, and Z. I need to anticipate for this. I need to have this much capital on and so on and so forth. So now I'm in a better place and I have a better lens on it. But when it was happening, I was just stuck in it.
Yep.
So I would definitely say that's one of the biggest things. Don't get stuck in your failures.
Mm-hmm.
I think that kind of goes to Carl to focusing on what you can control versus what you can't control.
Like
Because
that.
when you're going through and you have this fear of failure and you're saying, okay, this happened, that happened, so on and so forth, not realizing, Carl, to your point with the construction, that wasn't within your control.
Nope.
Right.
But if you focus on the things that you can control,
Mhm.
it gives you a better sense of, okay, I'm going to be all right. And then for the next time, because once you go through that failure, next time you say, okay, you know what? These are variables that I can control. These are variables that I can't. So let me focus on the ones that I can control, because at the end of the day, stuff is going to happen.
Yep.
I think one of the things too, to kind of help folks overcome fear is having or talking to trusted individuals.
Oh yeah.
People that, you can kind of lean on. Hey, what do you think about this, that, and the third? And a lot of times we don't use those resources because quite honestly, we don't know, what people have gone through. But by trusted, I think that's the key word
For
right
sure.
there.
Oh yeah.
You know, don't
Underline that.
family, not social media. Okay. We're
Please
talking
don't-
about
yeah, please,
friends that you
please.
may have.
Don't post
that
it
you-
online.
Yes, that you can talk to, because that helps. You can also brainstorm different ways, because I think I've come across some interesting takes on failure, and one of them says fail fast, fail often,
I like
and that's
that.
going to help you get through, whatever it may be.
Mhm.
And brainstorming again, I think you can probably put that in conjunction with trusted individuals. You sit down and say, hey, man, I had this going on, didn't work out. What do you think? Well, you know what? You never know.
Mhm.
Because ultimately, it's fine to take responsibility for things. Because I know a lot of times when we do fail, we're like, man, we take all of that on,
Yeah.
not realizing that it's not always all your fault.
Hmm.
And that kind of goes back to stuff like, perfectionism and so on and so forth. We can't, do that.
Yeah.
Some of those trusted individuals that you're talking about too may not necessarily be what you would say the models of success themselves.
Mhm.
Because as we said, there are a lot of people who will play it safe. I've gotten some great advice from people who, particularly on business and running a business and how to, set up your entrepreneurial endeavors, from people who work a 9 to 5 and that's all they did. That's all they ever wanted to do. Because that's their lane.
Oh yeah.
And they can say, oh yeah, you can, you might want to look at this. And if you're marketing to people, I know I would like to see X, Y, and Z. And you're like, oh, okay.
Mhm.
And you're like, well, you should do, no, I don't want to do that. But that's fine.
Oh,
And
So
the-
how did you come to know though that was sage advice?
Because you
Good
start
question.
look, well,
good question.
you have to kind of look at the individual and then look at what they're, because they typically, I'll give you an example. My uncle, love my uncle to death. Never had much of a steady job to speak of.
Hey,
I mean, he through his whole life
was he a hustler?
wasn't really a hustler. No, he got by. I mean, he
He was a spark plug.
just got by. But he gave some sage advice. He came into my business. He looked around. He said, this is nice. This is nice. You might want to move this over here. Make sure that the lighting is good so people can see. I mean, it was just like he started giving me like, and I'm looking at him like, how would you know this? You know what I'm saying? Why would, and it's like, it makes sense.
Mhm.
I can, and he was like, well, I'm looking at your pricing here and you might want to run some specials and you might want to do, because it's things that as a consumer,
Yeah.
he's speaking to me as a consumer,
Mhm.
but he's giving me, and I'm like, well, you got all this. Yeah, but you do your thing. Now I'm gonna go back over here and lay up. I mean,
My day
And
is done.
He was
I mean,
pontificating.
he's done. He did things. He had and I would always call them lucid moments because he would just be like, where's it coming from?
It's just a slight epiphany.
He just didn't want to do it himself. He had no desires to,
Fair.
work really. But I mean, I said, love my uncle, man. Rest in peace. Rest in peace. But I mean, it's one of them. You have to. People always want to say, well, I want to go talk to the billionaire. That whole talking to Jay-Z thing back in the day.
Dinner with Jay-Z.
Yeah. What you gonna tell? I mean, I'm saying, what you gonna tell me? I mean, you can talk to the people down the street. You can talk to people on your block. You can talk to people
Mhm.
all kind. Even if you're in school, you can start telling teachers, I got this idea about doing this and that. You don't know who these teachers know. You don't know if they're running a business themselves.
Yeah,
You don't know if they're, my brother, he owns, an auto supply company, and you never know.
Mhm.
So it's like if you verbalize these things to people that you don't even think know or that have these ideas of being, a success, because you, again, trusted individuals. You don't want to say things and then people laugh at you and now you say, okay, well, now I feel like I'm a failure. I feel embarrassed and I won't even try. But, you got to find those type people.
Okay. What about positive thinking? You think that's something that can help you overcome that fear of failure, B?
Yeah, definitely. Because going back to like the rough patch we were talking about earlier,
Mhm.
I think positivity is going to be the biggest way to get around that, right? Because say you're going through your rut And it's the little things. I always say that in life. It's the little itty bitty things. So I'm not gonna say that you're gonna fail Tuesday and be ready to attack the world Wednesday. But let's say if you wake up Wednesday, you start with a positive mindset, pray, do what you got to do, start the day. A good thing I learned from Jordan Peterson: make your bed, just to start putting the pieces
That's
back
your
together.
first accomplishment.
Yeah.
Making your
So
bed.
it's just the little wins. And if you just take those little wins, you're slowly kind of etching away at that failure, because now you're kind of branching your way out of that storm. So my way to look at it, just take little tiny wins to get your way back out of it, because you're not just going to fall out that hole completely unless you got superpowers. And I can't give you that.
So we haven't mentioned it, but we're all very involved in our church. So we're Christian men.
Yes.
Where do you think spirituality plays a role in this? For you.
For me, it's a big part, because again, like I say, I fail in life, and I, don't try to ruminate on them, but I definitely pray on my failure. So I have to reflect on them. But I think that helps me move past them slowly but surely. And I mean, if you look at plenty of Bible stories, the Bible is not just a super success story. Look at Jesus. I don't have to go through the crucifixion, but don't we all want to be like Jesus? His life wasn't essentially perfect the way it ended, but he rose.
Mm.
That's an ultimate failure there. You were crucified and you rose the next couple of days later. That is a huge input there. So modeling that prayer, like I have a little prayer jar. I'll toss something in there. I put a lot of my failures in that jar. And if I look back at them 6 months later, I prayed about it and hey, it's past now. So just a little bit of my faith. So now I'm going to spin it around and see what you guys can inject.
No, I agree with what you're saying, because, coming up, you always heard this, David and Bathsheba, and he look what he did, Moses was a murderer and he came and so you hear the, my, and this is just my little thing with church.
Come on, lay it on us.
I love the word. I agree with it. That's fine. Those stories and those tales, even Jesus, even, rising again and so forth, and going on to be Savior. They're told from the lens of this is what happened then. And typically they're told by somebody who says, and I've overcome as well.
Yeah,
so now
definitely.
You can.
Mm-hmm.
The failures, the ongoing failures aren't talked about enough. And it's not from the spiritual lens. Yes, we have overcome.
Mm-hmm.
Period. However, we're still in this natural life.
Mm-hmm.
So how do I, like you said, if you have to pray on your failures, if you have to first acknowledge them.
Yeah, that's where you start.
And I think that a lot of times we hear from, the preachers who don't want to acknowledge their failures.
Yeah.
Not I mean like current failures. Like I know I didn't pay my light bill last week. I mean, I don't need to know all your business, but I'm just giving that as an example, because it's like, I was a wretch undone and I was saved and sanctified and now I'm on the road for the Lord. Okay, but you got saved in 1972. This is 2024. So you ain't did nothing wrong. Ain't nothing happened in your life.
Squeaky clean.
From 72
Squeaky
to
clean.
2024.
Not at all.
I need to hear.
Not nothing that he gonna tell you in church.
But that's my problem, because a lot of times people that you're going to project that to people and say, once you accept Christ, you fine. Everything's going to be fine.
Ooh, yeah, that's a good one.
And that's an unrealistic expectation.
It's an impossible expectation.
And I think because people don't really look into it. Look who Jesus hung out with when you want to look. Jesus was with the thieves, the prostitutes. Jesus was not with the lawyers and the attorneys and doctors of his time. He wanted those that were not perfect. He wanted the failures, essentially, we could say that.
Exactly.
Those were his disciples, the failures.
So if we see that, that's what I'm saying. You get to a certain point, and not all churches are like this.
Mm-hmm.
And I really appreciate the ones that aren't, who will go out, particularly ministers, not necessarily even the pastor, but just ministers, and be able to talk to people where are you? Meet you where you are. And like you said, What do you need to succeed? What do you need? What are your fears? Where have you failed in life that you feel that you failed in life? Because like you said, a lot of things, it's not as bad as you think it is.
Nope.
Yeah.
You
I
know.
mean, it's to in that situation, being able to make people feel comfortable enough that they'll open up.
Mhm.
Because a lot of
Yeah, that's a
people,
good
you know, we tend to internalize,
Mhm.
you know, and
I know I do.
you see, you
Yep.
may not know that, you know, I got a fear of worms, which I do, by the way. But
Hmm.
if I don't talk about it, you're not gonna know.
Yeah, it's in the closet.
You know, and y'all not gonna get me to go fishing and put no worms on. I'm not doing that. That's disgusting. But
No fishing trips.
I don't have no fear of worms. I don't like clowns though. Now, I don't have a fear. I don't have a fear. It's not a fear, but I don't like clown or makeup on the faces and all that
So
minds
he's not
and all
getting
that kind of
clown
stuff.
now,
I don't like it.
family, we going down a rabbit hole.
Yeah, I'm sorry. My fault.
So what are you guys afraid of?
My-
They could do that with one day.
But I think it's important, you know, that we face these fears,
Mhm.
you know, and that fear of failure, it's a big one,
Oh yeah, yeah.
you know, because nobody wants to be made to feel like I'm not good enough. I don't measure up. You know, we didn't talk about social media, so I'd like to jump into that real quick because I think that is something that now it's ingrained in society.
Yes.
And I see it more so with the younger generation coming up than anything.
Mhm.
They measure themselves to the facade of people on social media.
Yep.
You know, not realizing that these rappers actually have rented that car. That's not his Bentley, you know, that's not his house. But yet you have kids looking at this and that's what they want. And if they can't get it, then oh my God, I'm a failure.
Yep.
You know,
Game over.
how have we gotten to this point? Because as parents, it's hard for us to combat that. We can tell them all day, man, that stuff ain't real. That stuff ain't real. And as soon as they leave out the house and they back on that phone,
Oh yeah.
they've forgotten everything that we just told them.
I've always tried to tell my children, I don't know anyone who has been successful without working.
Fair.
I don't care what you do, you have to put in the work. You have to put, even people on social media, you seeing these pictures, you're seeing all this stuff and what they have spent hours on one post, making sure the angles are right, making sure the lighting is right, making sure the clothes are fitting right, even if it's the IG models, whatever it is. They they've put hours in on this, editing, scheduling, all of that it's still work.
Oh yeah, yeah.
You can't just go out, take a picture, put it up, and then okay.
But see, that's just it. They do all of that preparation to make it look like it was impromptu.
It was impromptu,
Yeah.
right?
And then you got the victim that says, "Well, darn it, why can't I? Where's my sports car?"
Yeah, you know, like you said, Jay, I'm gonna rent this car. I got to get that. I got to figure out my budget. All of that it's work. Doing everything that you got to put that work in, and I think that they think that it's like add water, stir in it, and there it is. And it doesn't work like that.
Mhm.
And it's like, okay, well, if I go out and I do that, I take a picture and I post it up, and nobody goes, I don't get the 100,000 followers in a day.
Mhm.
Oh, now I'm a failure.
Yep.
You
Bingo.
didn't put the work in.
Mhm.
And not to say that everybody's not going to be able to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, come on, you know.
I think for me, one of the best analogies that I have seen recently in regards to a fear of failure is babies, toddlers learn how to walk.
Mm.
Notice when they get
Oh,
up,
yeah.
they stand, take a step, they fall. They don't sit there.
Mm-mm.
They get back up.
Mm-mm.
Take a couple more steps, fall, get back up. And I think ultimately when you think about it, at some point they get it.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Look at
Then
all
they
this.
start walking. After that, they running.
They running.
So if we look at, you know, the way that our fear of failure is almost designed, that's a perfect analogy, you know, because I think, you know, family, one of the things that we want you guys to realize is that everybody has a fear of failure. But for me, it's about persevering. You fail, you get up, you try again, you know, and for us, we've had failures in our lives, failures in relationships, you know, just failures, you know, jobs, the whole nine. But again, I always, you know, tell people that I talk to about this, you can't give up.
Never.
Because if you give up and you just quit, it's harder to get that momentum to start back up
Mhm.
than if whatever obstacle you're up against, if it's there, okay, now all of a sudden you can't go full step,
Nope.
but you're taking baby steps. You know, you still have to continue to persevere. And the Bible tells us about that
Oh, yeah.
perseverance, you know. So I think it behooves us to, you know, really take a look at failures and, you know, learn to embrace them, learn from them, and realize that it's just a part of life. It's gonna happen. You know, every day something happens.
True. Yeah. It's inevitable, right?
So, B, let me ask you, what would be some of your solutions to overcoming that fear of failure?
Look at it as a teacher. And I'm currently doing that with some situations in my life now. I'm like, okay, this failed, but but I'm like, okay, I got so much I can learn from X, Y, and Z, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then it gives me optimistic feelings about it too, because I say again, like I was saying earlier, I know what to do, what not to do. So now I feel like, you know, being in the army, whatever, you know, kind of where not to go in this minefield, right?
Mhm.
Not
So
all
say-
the time.
Yeah. Put a star by that. But
You got to
You know-
put some stuff out there and see if it's.
But you see where I'm going. With
Yeah,
that. I look at it as a teacher, right? Because without the failures, I'm not prepared for tomorrow, next week, or next year. And then again, like you said, with the situation that somebody's a billionaire, they failed a million times, and that's just another one I have. So, you know, I don't have kids or anything right now, but I'm pretty sure down the road, if I do, God willing, have that, I can say, hey, this is where your dad screwed up. Let me try to help you out here.
Well, there's certain stories you can't tell them today, you know, are adults.
Well, oh yeah. And then some probably I won't until, you know, but I got a couple I might be able to spin out there.
Mhm.
But basically, I try to use it as a teacher, and I wasn't always as receiving it to failure. So it took me some time to build myself up to be like, okay, I failed. It's gonna be okay. So I think those two things, looking at it as a teacher, and then just getting past that personal fear that failure is like death, because it's not, you know.
So how did you arrive at that point? Was it someone talking to you, or is it something that you just, you know, intrinsically started to figure out?
I would say it was a mix of myself going to therapy and then talking to other people that have failed themselves. Because again, therapy is where I kind of realized I had this anxiety type fear of failure. So I was always like, oh my God, this is bad. And I would get myself stuck in that storm where I'm like, I'm too focused on a potential failure before it even happens. Then it does fail. Oh, it failed, but I didn't die, you know? So once I was able to get rid of that, I have less of a fear of failure. I know it's like you were saying earlier, it's part of life, you know, I'm gonna fail tomorrow, next week, whenever. So I think that is part of it. And then on the other side, like I'm saying, I'm gonna learn something from this. That's the biggest thing. Because you won't learn it immediately.
Mm.
It might hit you in 3 weeks, like, oh, don't do this tomorrow or whatever. So you gotta combine some stuff together, but in the end, you'll get a recipe that can help you look at a failure as, you know, just something like drinking water. It's every day, it's part of life.
Okay, Carl, what would be some of your ways, or one of the ways that you think you can overcome that fear of failure?
Basically, by, for me, educating yourself on what you're getting into. Look at, okay, I want to do this. What are the pros and cons? And the pros are typically going to outweigh the cons. Like you said, if it's something, and I don't mean like, you know, I'm going to jump off this cliff with no parachute, and I think I can hit that body of water down there.
That's a failure. You need to
Now,
feel.
the con is I could die. You know, but if it's something that you want, you know, a business you want to start, or you know, a job that you want to go for, or going back to school, or whatever it is, what are the pros and cons? And the pros are going to outweigh the cons. They really are.
Mhm.
And if you go into it with that mindset, like, okay, if this starts going left, you know that this, okay, well, maybe I can course correct while I'm in
Oh
it.
yeah.
And that way I don't fail. But even if I course correct and it still doesn't work out, well, I already anticipate. I thought this might be one of the outcomes. So I'm not that hurt.
Yeah.
Okay, I like that, Carl, because first thing I thought about when you said educate yourself is a child's mentality. You know, little kids, they see somebody out there skydiving. I can do that. And you say, no, you can't.
Yeah, right.
So
You don't know
know,
nothing
to-
about it.
to that point, you want to educate yourself when you're, getting into something. And if you have a fear of failure, I think number one, it's natural.
Oh yeah.
And we have to remember that we can always, take it. We can embrace it. We can learn from it. But it's important to understand that we gonna go through it in whatever area that we face. And family, I think, what we want you guys to understand is it's nothing wrong with having that fear of failure because everybody has it. At some point in your life, whatever you may do, you gonna have that fear of failure. But ultimately, you'll be okay. Don't let it stop you from reaching your goal. And the more that you fail, the better off you'll be in the end because you'll start to develop your own solutions as to how to solve your problems. And, we all know that how you overcome your fear of failure may be different from mine. And we can always talk amongst ourselves. So I think it's very important with that. So I want to say, family, thank you for joining us. And until next time, stay prayerful. Stay positive, stay patient, stay peaceful.